Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we're so glad that you're back with us today. The Dropout, episode 1. I'm in a hurry. Failed visionary or feckless con artist? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves about Elizabeth Holmes.
This is a very interesting story.
It is.
How do you feel about this series?
Well, I think the series is really good.
Okay.
I think the story makes I'm sympathetic, and I'm also incredibly angry.
Yeah.
Because she really did put real people's lives at risk. Mm-hmm. She really did make it harder for women to start companies that are tech-based.
Yeah.
That in an area that was already really difficult for women to start a business.
Yep.
She made it worse. But she really was trying to do something positive.
Yeah. It's
be better.
Be better, but had she been better, would she have at all made it as far? Because the whole industry begs you. It begs you to cut the corners. Because the ends justify the means once you are fighting a double bind every time.
Right.
And yet I can't stand her.
Oh, I think you're supposed to not be able to stand her.
Yeah, I can't stand her.
No.
And I'm like, how in the world is somebody so unlikable able to rally this much? But it was the money. She literally was able to secure quite a bit of funding, and that bought her loyalty.
Right. Well, and it was easy for these white men to be able to sit on her board and look like they were champions of feminism. Mm-hmm. And it gave them a lot of clout and a lot of cred.
Yeah.
Oh, look, we don't just only invest in white men. Look at us. Look at us supporting this woman who's so young.
Right. Yes. And a little flag called virtue. Like, look at me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
A little bit. And, the money did buy her some loyalty, but if the show at all represents how she actually led, which was awful, the one thing she did do sort of right was she let the tech people be tech people. Like, once she was sort of, this is the cap of my technology experience, she let the people just do their thing. She held them accountable in all the wrong ways. But what she did do was she made them have ownership over what they were building. So by the time that, she was really destroying the reasons to have any loyalty to her, they were so invested in their own product that they've brought. And so then she could capitalize and leverage on that.
Yeah. I mean, she was good at it, but it's a horrible thing to be good at. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a really terrible thing to be good at.
See, and it was a lack of integrity.
Yeah.
But had the tech worked,
we would have forgiven the lack of integrity.
Mm-hmm. And had the tech worked in the beginning, she wouldn't have been up against a double bind. I'm not blaming anybody. Right. I'm just saying, when the technology was starting to be a fail, what we say about a lot of white men and men in general is that, it was just that we learned, it was okay, it's fine. Oh, that was a good thing. We notice all the good things about it, and we figure it's a great place to learn and develop, and it's one of those beautiful things that those really billionaire white men say about all the things you can fail at before you get it right. And you're like, but you got the extra chances, so that's cute.
Right.
Because
it seemed like many of them, not many of them, some of them, the ones that don't have grifter stories about them and miniseries right now, maybe were more willing to say, you know what, this just isn't going to work. We're going to have to go in a different direction before they were $900 million into something.
Yes, exactly. But they also knew that they could just cut their losses, and nobody would see them as a failure. They would just see it as a stepping stone towards getting something right. Whereas Elizabeth Holmes can't fail because she got one shot. Mm-hmm. One shot to get it right, because nobody's going to see it as a learning experience or a growth step or all of the many things that you failed at before you got the number one and all of that. No, she had to make it the first time. And that's the double bind women up against.
Right. Now, might she have been well advised to stay in college?
Yes.
And do the learning and get the experience and the knowledge and the opportunity to talk with people who were maybe not as visionary as she was, but had the expertise that she did not yet have. Maybe it would have worked out a little better. But she really had to be, she wanted to be Steve Jobs badly. And he dropped out. That's what I need to do.
Right.
Oh, it's gross. Anyway.
It's so sad. The whole thing's so sad.
It really is.
Ugh.
Well, let's talk about this cast, which was fantastic.
It really was.
It was very enjoyable and infuriating to watch.
It was a little weird.
Well,
can I say that? I don't know. I felt like it was a little strange and that it worked.
Okay.
Like most casts, I'm like, ooh, what a great ensemble. And this whole cast had such a weird, awkward tension the whole time. And I was like...
But I think it worked because it was so true.
Yeah.
It was actually, they really did a good job. Yeah. Amanda Seyfried is Elizabeth Holmes. She was in Mean Girls, Mamma Mia. I forgot she was one of the kids on Big Love and on HBO, which I really loved, about a polygamous Mormon family.
I didn't see that.
Oh, I loved it. It was so soapy and Naveen Andrews was Sunny Balwani. Saeed Lost.
Oh my God. Okay.
Did you lose your mind?
Yes. First of all, it took me a while because he looks so different in this one. But the voice and the way, and I was like, who is this man? And I try to figure it out before I just look it up.
IMDb,
But I had to look it up and then I was like, Zai! I love him so much. And then I couldn't unsee it. And then I was like, wow, they made him look so old.
No, well.
They did a good job of making him look like such a particular character. I don't know. It was good.
Jackie, I hate to tell you this, but Lost has been off the air for a while.
Well, I know. I know, but he's only 53.
Yeah.
Right. Him on the red carpet, he's still going to clean up good.
Yeah.
They made him look so I don't know.
Just worn down by the grind of Silicon Valley.
There you go. Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Nailed
he
it.
was also in Sense8, which I loved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Laurie Metcalf is Dr. Phyllis Gardner. She was Jackie on Roseanne and the Connors. William H. Macy, who I saw, that was one complaint that I saw was he was billed as William H. Macy is in the Dropout.
Oh.
And then his part was relatively minor. In some ways, he played it was a major part in the story overall.
Right.
But he wasn't on screen a ton.
No.
But he was Richard Fuse. He was in the Fargo movie, Shameless, Boogie Nights. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth Marvel is Elizabeth's mom, Noelle Holmes. She was in Fargo, the TV show. Homeland, a variety of Law and Order iterations, House of Cards, Unbelievable with Toni Collette, who we just talked about last episode with pieces of her. It's a great cast.
Yeah. It's amazing. And Alan Rock. Hello.
Yes. Yes.
It's a pretty great time. It's a great cast. And just an amazing amount of tension that somehow just works.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you understand the pressure cooker that created Elizabeth.
Yeah, it was uncomfortable in a different way. Sometimes when you're uncomfortable in this. Right. I was just uncomfortable.
Oh,
okay. But I couldn't stop watching. So it was it's interesting.
All right, so let's recap. So we know from the very start, things have gone sideways for Theranos, which is a combination of the words therapy and diagnosis. And it was unendingly funny that the reporter asked her, why not Theranos? Diagnosis. And it was you could see that well, that's not what I named it. But damn it, that's a better name. It's like in Friends when Phoebe is like, it's a relaxy cab, like taxi cab. Oh, that is better.
It is so funny.
I mean, but yeah. Mm-hmm. But we know that it's all gone downhill by July of 2017 because Elizabeth Holmes is giving testimony about federal security law. Mm-hmm. You know it's serious when they're coming after you with federal security crimes.
Yep.
Whew. So we get tastes of who Elizabeth is and was herself. Wickedly intelligent, tenacious, ambitious, and broken in many, many ways. We get an indication of Theranos as it was at its most attractive. It had this veneer of groundbreaking work, hundreds of employees, and fantastic facilities, and a young female founder on the cover of magazines. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we see also in this first episode some of the fall, the investigations, the depositions that show us that everything fell apart at some point. So how far can brilliant ambition and hard, studious work take you, even if your idea proves impossible?
Love it.
Yeah. So, you know what?
What?
Let me tell you, it's awfully nice to finally watch something that critics and audiences not only agree on, but both like.
Really? Everybody liked this?
Everybody liked this.
And of course, I'm the one that's like, why is this so weird? Because I'm weird.
No,
That's
because
what it
it's
is.
weird, but it's weird in a true story way.
Yeah, I mean, like I wouldn't have rated it lowly, but the entertainment value is just, it hits different.
Yeah.
It's not low, it's just different.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Every time I watched it, I was like, I'm not really that entertained. Play it again.
Yeah.
What? Why? Why am I saying that?
Yeah,
like,
play the next episode.
What? What
Yeah.
am I doing? I just, for some reason, I didn't like it as much as I like a lot of the other things we watch.
Well, and you just don't have anybody to root for.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was feeling my feminist oats a little bit with it, though. I kind of was on her side a lot more than I anticipated, even though I'm very against so many of her choices. I just felt like she was such a product of society that I just,
Yeah. Well, I felt for her, but she made terrible decisions when she had people specifically tell her,
yeah.
don't stop, but know that you have to do this differently. And she refused to listen.
Yeah, she just refused.
Which I get. It's tough. It's tough.
It was a risk. It was a risk, but it does not excuse
No.
the illegal. It doesn't
No.
excuse the unethical.
Right.
And yet I totally understand why she felt she had to go there.
Well,
See,
yeah.
I could talk about this tension all day long. Move on.
Yeah, okay. Well, Scott Bryant of BBC.com said the series does become extremely watchable because you follow one person's journey from saying one lie to saying a bigger one, then having to cover the first lie with a bigger one to not reveal the second.
Yeah.
It's
it
a
is.
snake eating its tail as far as the lies go.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
I
And
mean-
there's a moment. There is a moment in the series where you actually see it happen, where it's the first lie.
Yeah.
It's the first time she just bends the rules because she has so much faith that it's going to work out. And it's just, she knows she's not going to get a second shot like others would.
Right.
And it's just like, oh, but if I just, it'll work. It'll work.
Oh, see, and that's why I say if she'd had a little more education, maybe she would have come to the conclusion it's not gonna work. I need to try something different before she'd, burned all of her money-raising bridges.
Yeah. Yeah, she went too far too fast.
Yeah. Which
definitely.
I get, she says at some point, go fast and break things, which is a Mark Zuckerberg quote.
thing.
No.
I mean, what she's referring to is in innovation.
Right.
There's something that really does matter there. But on the business side, which she could have learned had she gone to business school or studied organizational psychology or whatever she wanted to study, she would have realized that's just the R&D side.
Right.
You know, you don't go fast and break things in ways that are going to break you.
Yeah.
You're trying to break.
You're breaking the systems of oppression that are not allowing you to make advancements. You shouldn't try and break the laws of physics.
Right. You can't break others. What you're trying to do is break the lid on the innovation.
Right.
Move fast and break things like just keep going. Don't let all of the things that tell people to stay in their comfortable zone or we've tried that or that's a little too risky. No, you're going to break some stuff. You're going to have some failure. And that does work for a white man, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But in some ways. So she didn't realize she had a double bind, but she did.
Right.
She knew it instinctively, but she didn't know it cognitively enough to go, how do I play this right? Right? So how does she move fast and break things, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is Mark Zuckerberg is not going to go out and go make partnerships with people over tech that doesn't work.
Right.
He may make risks and partnerships with people who understand they're making a risk and partnership by trying something new in the market, but not when the back end doesn't work.
Right.
If that makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And her back end didn't work.
Her back end didn't work, and that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Oh.
It was a good idea, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea, but unfortunately not feasible at the current time with the technology that we have.
Right.
Yeah. So Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times, Hulu's take on the crooked Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes is the best of the current wave of true crime limited series, which I think is fair, is very good.
Wow. That was high praise.
I mean, we've talked about Inventing Anna. I thought this was more effective. Even if it's weirder, more uncomfortable.
You're absolutely right.
It's a very, Inventing Anna is a little more salacious and a soapy story. And this is following real, harmful crimes. Not that the crimes that Anna Sorokin perpetuated weren't harmful to people, because they were. It was harmful to people's livelihoods, which is not good. But it was literal test results that were inaccurate.
Right.
That affected people's lives. Come on.
Yeah. Exactly.
Come on. Anyway. So Christopher James of the Film Experience, Seyfried does an incredible job of charting Holmes' rise from ambitious but nervous newcomer to a confident, idiosyncratic grifter. I'm and I hate to be she was a grifter, but she was. I mean, by the middle of all of this, she knew the technology wasn't there, and she had her best people telling her it was a decade away, at best.
Yep.
And she couldn't live with that, so she pushed them harder and lied.
Yep. That's the point. She tried to make too much of it without wanting to do the back end. And research takes a long time. This kind of stuff, it could have been groundbreaking. It could have been. Who knows what might have happened. But had she just focused on research, but research doesn't make the money.
Well, and you know what? Sometimes research proves that the thing that you want to do isn't feasible.
It does. And
you've got to be accepting of that. And she just could not wrap her head around the idea that her idea might not work.
Yeah. I know. That's hard.
It's rough.
Ugh.
I've had a lot of things not work out in my life, but none of them have cost anywhere near the kind of money or the kind of human cost.
Right.
Speaking of human cost, The Guardian had an article, How Theranos Drama The Dropout Gets Scam Culture and Tech Culture Right. This is by Adrian Horton. The Dropout imagines the desperation and emotional extremity undergirding Elizabeth's lies without obscuring their cost.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, that is right on.
Very true. Very true.
That is just right. The Dropout paints Elizabeth Holmes less as a visionary outcast than a prolific imitator, which I think is fair. That's a fair assessment of the situation. So The Atlantic had a podcast with Kevin Townsend, Sophie Gilbert, Megan Garber, and Shirley Lee, where they talked about it. Is it fact and is it fiction? When does fake it till you make it become simply fraud? But Shirley Lee had specifically some very insightful things to say about it. What I appreciate about The Dropout is that the show does have a heightened kind of humor to comment on how weird Elizabeth Holmes is, but also how weird startup culture is. Mm-hmm. Which I was like,
yes.
See, because, I don't have a lot of experience with startup culture. I mean, I've seen, some of these things, and I understand that, there's a lot of money, and especially when you bring in venture capitalists, and there's a lot of big promises that always don't pan out. But,
right.
It is this weird, secretive sort of culture. And so Sophie Gilbert also brings up the idea of girl boss, which was...
Oh, yes.
Really
Let's talk about this.
It was really prevalent in the 20-teens, the early 20-teens, to talk about a girl boss. And Shirley Lee hits the nail on the head that it's deeply flawed, the idea of a girl boss. And she said it's really because the people who called themselves girl bosses and did it with this idea that they were furthering feminism were women who already had privilege in some way. The girl boss identity was something that white, wealthy women could exploit. Women who are able to become girl bosses already had the means to become girl bosses, but it also shows the cruelty of the idea of it itself, that if you didn't work hard enough, then there was something wrong with you. It wasn't that the system is set up that you have to work harder just to do it, but it kind of takes that patriarchy that already is putting restrictions on women to be able to participate.
Right.
But it's saying, it's taking that patriarchy and internalizing it and saying, well, you just didn't work hard enough.
It's the meritocracy.
Yes.
Right? It's a fallacy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that the promises are really false. And it's not that merit doesn't play a role and factor in some way, but it's easily twisted.
Right.
And it's easily exploited. And when systems are built around it in such awful ways, it does. But then sometimes it's like that, I don't have a word for it, but almost like a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, where if you are making it as a girl boss, this is how you make yourself feel better about it, and dissolve this desire that you have to fix it for the ones coming behind you.
Right. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Is It True? Psychology Break and Real Life.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, an essay. We promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity, or something I never thought of.
Is it true? So this whole series is basically based on a podcast of the same name. It was hosted by Rebecca Jarvis and produced by ABC News. So that's where it all came from, basically.
Yeah.
Now, it was based on a lot of research by a lot of different people. Mm-hmm. We'll get to some of that. So here are a few quick true things from the first episode.
Okay.
That I got. I got these from a lot of different research. All of those sources will be on our social media pages, but they're just quick things. So Chris Holmes, Elizabeth's dad, did work for Enron and did get laid off. Elizabeth did routinely accost Professor Robinson in an effort to be admitted to his master's research group. And he was an early board member. Dr. Garner did, in fact, warn Elizabeth that her ideas were untenable. And Elizabeth's parents did agree to invest her tuition money so that she could start the company. So Parade did a little more in-depth thing about some of about a lot of things in the series. I'm only going to talk about things that appeared in the first episode.
Okay.
So
hit me.
And they found it pretty factual for at least the first 3 episodes. That's the only ones that they talked about. But Elizabeth really did meet Sonny on a Mandarin immersion program.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
He really did go on this program because he had just sold a company and wanted to learn Chinese better. But in the show, they indicate that this was her first time going. Mm-hmm. This was actually the 3rd time she'd been.
Really?
She went 3 summers while she was in high school to do this Mandarin program. And the 3rd summer that she was there, she was having a really hard time making friends. And it really was Sonny who came to her aid and befriended her.
I really thought that'd be more of a liberty there. Wow, I'm surprised. Okay.
All right. Pretty accurate, except for the fact that, oh, by the way, he was married.
Oh, what?
Yeah, he was married. They got divorced shortly after that, sometime between 2001 and when they met and 2004. Mm-hmm. She moved in with him in 2005.
Okay.
So it's unclear if there was any kind of overlap. Which, whatever. I'm not here to judge about that, what people do. I mean, but he was quite a lot older than her. And it seemed a little predatory in some ways. She earned her way into that program because it was only supposed to be for college students, but she'd already been studying Mandarin, and she impressed the program's director with her fluency and was able to work her way into the program. Now, Richard Fuse said that it wasn't really Elizabeth's idea, that her parents kind of pushed her into it.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So that offices that Elizabeth had at the very beginning, like in the bad part of town, Burlingame is where they were located. That actually was true. She really did have offices in that area. There were frequent shootings, and it was all true, including the car window shootout. Wow. It was a stray bullet. She wasn't being shot at.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. But what wasn't true was that she was already calling it Theranos at that time.
Oh, okay.
She was calling it real-time cures.
Okay.
In the beginning, when she was in those early offices. And after Chris Holmes got laid off from Enron, now the show makes it look like they're going to continue to live in Houston, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not actually how it worked. They moved back to Washington, D.C., where they had lived before. And because Noelle was some kind of political consultant. But they moved back there, and Richard Fuse did let them live in a house that they had just moved out of. Oh, okay. But it wasn't in Houston. It was in D.C.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So a few things. But mostly really pretty accurate.
Wow.
As far as we know. Obviously her dancing in her bedroom, looking at a poster of Steve Jobs, or really loving the song I'm in a Hurry.
Yeah.
Those are things that may have really been creative license.
Yeah.
But
it did build her up and made her look very weird.
Yeah.
Not weird. I mean, it's not like I didn't dance in my room to even that song. I loved that song when I was her age at that time. And, but okay, is it intentional? I don't know whose idea. Maybe you're going to hit me with this later. But I was really impressed with the way that they made her look so awkward. The way she spoke was equally charming and fluent as it was really stuttered and awkward. And I thought, how in the world is she doing that? And what is she doing with her face? You know what I'm saying? And I don't know who brought that, but I don't know if it's true. But I think
Have you watched any of the like interviews with the actual Elizabeth Holmes?
I have not.
Oh, well, so I like fell into the show and then binged it. And then there's a documentary on HBO. I don't remember what it's called, but I'll put a link to it. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but it was a whole documentary, and they had lots of like interviews with her from before it all fell, and like the offices that she had are now a medical school. Isn't that ironic? But they had lots of like interviews with her, and Amanda did an amazing job.
Yeah. Wow.
It is just like her.
Isn't that interesting? There's something about it. I don't know what it is.
She's so awkward and earnest. She comes across as very earnest and somehow cold.
Yeah, I think the person who did the review kind of mentioned it. The mimicry.
Yes,
it's like she mimicked the accent and the cadence of people that she thought got the job done.
Yeah.
Because she's from Houston, right?
Well,
I mean, she lived
kind of
there.
she lived in Houston for a while. It's hard to tell
And
where
then
she was really
DC,
from.
though.
They were DC
So,
and
like,
then Houston
That's
and
some
then
Southern accent in there. There
Yeah.
would be a little drawl. I mean, just a little or something more fluid.
I don't know. She went
it's
to a
almost
pretty
like-
ritzy school in Houston.
But it
so
almost felt like she was using English as a second language. But I guess it kind of was, right? Like for her, I mean, maybe not second language, but I mean, like with her fluency in Mandarin, maybe that influence.
the way she spoke English a little bit.
Yeah, maybe so.
That's possible.
I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah. So the President's Scholar Program at Stanford,
Yeah.
it was a thing, and a thing that Elizabeth qualified for.
Okay.
From 1995 to 2003. So the Stanford magazine, their archives, has an article from 1999 talking about this program. And basically they were talking about how they get a lot of applicants, they accept so many, and then so many actually attend.
Right, okay.
So of their acceptances, about 65% at this time attended.
Okay.
But when you looked at just the top students who were accepted, it was much lower. It was only about 36%
Okay.
of the top students who were choosing to go to Stanford. Obviously, those students have more options.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either better financial aid packages or opportunities or whatever.
Yeah.
So this President's Scholars Program was launched in 1995 to try and up that high achiever number.
Okay.
And so they invited about 100 gifted students per class to be a part of this program. And they had some little benefits. They had things like luncheons where they had access to professors who might be mentors. And they had specific mentors assigned to them as part of their education.
Oh,
So
that's
they had them to help them with grant proposals and things like that. And they also had a grant. It was called an exploration grant. So they would have about $3,000 to study whatever they wanted.
What?
Yeah. It was like money that they just gave them and to try and entice them. And it's really not a lot of money, but when you're looking at, well, I can go to Harvard and struggle to get my financing, or I can have $3,000 handed to me at Stanford. Maybe I'll just go to Stanford.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And they said basically this was just to help the high school seniors who were trying to make the decision feel special.
Yeah.
That's basically what it did, and that it helped.
I would assume
it did. It bumped their high achiever attendance rate by 12 or 15%.
Okay.
So, but it's not active any longer. But not in that particular name.
Right, probably.
Yeah. So Sunny and Elizabeth were out somewhere in China, and they marveled at the beautiful sunset. And
Yeah.
Sunny said it was because of the pollution. Wrong. reconnectwithnature.org has an article about the science behind beautiful sunsets. And they said that sunsets and sunrises are pretty because the sun is low on the horizon and it passes through more atmosphere. And that's partly what gives us color. But really what gives us the beautiful color is the amount of moisture in the air.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's not, and that actually pollution, dust, and smoke from wildfires and stuff can change the way it looks, but they typically mute it.
Right, okay.
Because they absorb more of the light than the
moisture,
other things. The moisture reflects
prisms,
the light.
And create.
Yes, so the most beautiful ones you're going to see are usually less pollution rather than more.
That makes sense.
Yes. At the end of their time together in China, Sunny and Elizabeth talk about Sunny's dad's death.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth has Sunny pull out money from his wallet to burn in honor of his dad. So I was like, do the Chinese is this really a thing that the Chinese do? No, not really. It is, but it's not.
Okay.
So they don't burn real money. They burn something called joss paper or ghost money.
Okay.
Is basically what it's called. And it's like an offering to the ancestors so that they can have it in the afterlife. So that part of it was true, and it dates back like 2,500 years. It's a very old tradition, but burning real money is unacceptable and considered unlucky in most Asian cultures.
Okay.
So they wouldn't have burned real money.
Right.
Though she was right when she said something about, well, some people burn other things, and they'll make little paper replicas of houses or iPhones or whatever, and they'll burn those along to, hopefully as a reference to their ancestors, to give them what they can in the next life. Right. And so they wouldn't have burned real money.
Okay.
That would have been
that's answered.
That would have been weird. Unlucky. Yeah. I mean, it's just a different culture, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But
real money.
But real money.
I mean, very few cultures I could see being like, burn that cash. I feel like that's something we all have in common.
And Elizabeth Holmes did indeed appear on a whole bunch of magazine covers.
Okay.
So she was in the New Yorker and Wired, but not as cover articles or pictures. But just some of them were Fortune in June of 2014. The CEO is out for blood. The Forbes 400 in 2015 that came out in September. I love the way they talk about this. The magazine cover looks like a Silence of the Lambs inspired interpretation of Steve Jobs brandishing an iPod. So when Steve Jobs was on the Fortune 400. He was in his black turtleneck holding an iPod.
Right, okay.
And they had Elizabeth Holmes in exactly the same position holding her little microvial thing with blood in it. So it looked like a Silence of the Lambs inspired interpretation.
That's funny.
Which I thought was really funny. I was like, well, I got to read that. Inc. had her on the cover in October of 2015. And the New York Times Style magazine, which I thought was weird because her hair was always a mess, had her on the cover in October of 2015. And then the most ominous one, it has a very subdued title, but it was one of the ones that made the most impact on Theranos. Hot startup Theranos has struggled with its blood testing technology. The Wall Street Journal, October of 2015, which is really like John Carreyrou finally, he'd been working on it for a long time and got this out. And the title is very misleading for all the white hot dirty bombs that it dropped on Theranos.
Wow.
Yeah. All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at KillerFunPod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. So, psychology break.
Yeah.
So last time with Pieces of Her, we talked about a controlling parent.
Yes.
Now we're going to talk about critical parents.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Because Noelle fussed at Elizabeth about her hair roots. She's there to get some blood drawn, her physical, before she goes to Beijing. And her mom fusses at her. Oh, you look better as a blonde. You need to get your roots done. The nurse hands her cookies to eat before they draw the blood so that she won't pass out. And the mom takes them and puts them in the garbage. She was very critical.
Yeah.
Even not so much overtly. I mean, it is overt that she was critical, but like just taking the cookies, like, ooh, it was so squeaky.
Yeah.
As adults, people who are raised by critical parents can become easily defensive, feel inadequate, or possibly develop an intense need for perfection, according to a peacefullifecounseling.com, which I think we kind of see. Mm-hmm. She really is trying to strive for perfection and had some anxiety because of it, because she had this strong need for it. And the article goes on to talk about how counseling is really important. And it's not about blaming parents for being critical. It's about understanding how you're wired and how you work and how to work within that framework,
right,
and, as well as some repairing, but to understand yourself and try and work how you already are.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that some forgiveness is helpful in its various forms, whatever you're looking for there. But I would think counseling is very, very important for that critical parent.
Yeah.
And also like reframing, like learning to see your parents as a flawed person. Mm-hmm. And maybe in a lot of cases, gaining some empathy for their intentions and some forgiveness for how they came across. But I think in this case, her parents were equally critical and absent.
Yeah, that's super
like,
fair.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's a
that's
really
like,
not great situation.
That's just not great. Because then you can't even say, oh my God, like you love me too much.
Yeah.
Like you can't even, like you kind of have to wonder, like, oh, you're critical when you're here and then you're kind of absent. Mm-hmm. Like that's that, oh gosh, you feel hated.
Right.
Just, yeah. And,
yeah. So this article cites John Gottman.
I was about to say.
And
Four Horsemen.
Well, they cite specifically that couples who were kind of able to overcome this together, instead of being critical of one another, which, can happen in any kind of relationship, but it's especially hard between a parent and child, and then also between partners.
Yes, especially.
So if they had a critical parent and a critical spouse, that can be really difficult for them. And they're statistically maybe a little more likely to choose a critical spouse than they would be otherwise because of
how your love map is developed.
Right,
and all of
exactly. But he did a study, and when he found that when people transformed their criticisms into wishes rather than pointing out their partner's fault, saying, I express it as a desire that would improve your relationship, that it's much more well accepted and less likely to cause any further trauma or strife in the relationship.
Yep.
So,
yeah, John Gottman's Four Horsemen is very, very helpful to, and he can, to his credit, like just to point out, he can predict a divorce in a marriage to an 85% accuracy based on the research that he's done.
Wow.
That's like, what? You don't see that. You don't see that in research, right? Like
that kind of efficacy is unheard of.
But it's just that, and they identified the Four Horsemen, and criticism is one of them. And that step to recognizing the wishes, like moving from there's something wrong with you to owning your own wishes is hard. That takes a lot of internal work. So back to counseling individually as much as together, which is why the parent-child counseling can work out well. You don't have to go with your parent.
Right. Yeah.
Go. You.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the swaddle.com has a similar sort of article about the long-term effects that it can cause a child or an adult to feel their losses more acutely, but be unable to gauge their successes.
Yeah.
So they're unable to accept their successes, but they feel very badly about failures that they've had. They tend to seek validation in adulthood, and they'll internalize criticism. There's something wrong with me, rather than recognizing that sometimes it's situational failures. It can affect your job prospects. So they either think that they're not good enough, or they think that they can accomplish anything if they just work hard enough, which is exactly what we saw in Elizabeth. Yep. And that they do a lot of comparisons, which Elizabeth did a ton of. She compared herself to every famous entrepreneur dropout.
Right.
But failed to look at any of the dropouts whose ventures did not succeed.
Yes, that's called sampling on the bias.
Yeah.
All right. So listen, if you sample only on those who made it, well, you really aren't getting the true story.
Right.
And, you know, it's so easy. Like, we read these books, and there's books published about all these wonderful people, and we say, oh, let's look at how leaders who succeed have done it, and then let's apply that. But there's, honestly, there's equally, if not more, way more people who did all the same things and didn't make it.
Right.
And, you can't, you can't sample on the ones who just succeeded.
Right. Yep.
There's some great studies about that out there.
Yes. And, oh, by the way, it turns out that ignoring your trauma isn't the best way to deal with it, because Elizabeth is sexually assaulted, basically is told it's her word against her, and they don't believe her. And her mother tries to be supportive. She says, I believe you, but then also tells her, just ignore it.
Just drop it.
And that's really not very good advice.
It's not. Again, it's the double bind, though.
Right.
Unfortunately, women who are assaulted have to make a choice about, is this going to now be my cause?
Right.
Instead of just fighting it and not pushing it down for the quote victim, it has to become the hill you die on, which takes time, energy, margin, and efforts away from moving on in life in some ways. And so I feel the struggle of that double bind, and why so many people want to just ignore it, but it's not good.
No, it's not. And Good Therapy has an article mostly based on a book called Hardwiring Happiness, The New Brain Science of Contentment, Calm, and Confidence by Rick Hansen. And he says, your brain is wired in such a way that when it evolved, that it was primed to learn quickly from bad experiences, but not so much from good ones, which is fair. But he goes on to say, even though your brain is really good at learning and recording these bad memories, they're not permanently locked into your brain. And he has a 4-step approach to help deal with it a little bit, which I thought was really interesting. And paradoxically, recalling bad memories can help us heal from old wounds. So his 4-step process has an acronym HEAL, HEAL. Have a positive experience. So you take a positive experience and you put yourself in a positive mental headspace before you start recalling this traumatic one. Enrich it. Too often we spend minutes and sometimes hours or days ruminating over a negative experience, but we gloss over the positive. So here we're going to take time to deepen that positive experience. So instead of ruminating on your bad experience, initial positive experience in the H, have a good experience. You're going to spend some time with that good experience and flesh it out for yourself. Really feel it.
Yeah.
And then you're going to imagine that your whole body absorb it. The A is your whole body is just infused with this good experience. And then you pull up your negative experience. Only after you've done these 3 things to get yourself in a really good space do you link this positive experience with a negative experience. And when you already feel good and you think about this terrible experience, you can kind of infuse it with this better feeling that you don't feel so scared and in the moment. It lessens it. He likens it to weeding a garden. So you're in the garden and it's beautiful. Then you see this ugly weed. And instead of fixating on the weed and feeling awful about the weed, you just go and pull it.
Yeah.
And it has less power. Now, are the weeds going to come back?
Yeah.
But you know what? It doesn't have to be harmful.
Right.
It doesn't have to be so detrimental. It doesn't have to take over this entire garden.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
That's
helpful
a good approach.
Advice.
That's a good approach from like the positive psychology sort of realm. And I would liken it in cognitive to like a reframing.
Right. Yeah.
Or the practice of EDMR.
Yeah.
You know, where you pull up the bad experience, but you distract yourself. So in that way, you remove like sort of the emotional link. You're deadening the emotional link so that you can do the cognitive reframing. And then when you come back to the emotional link, now it's reacting in a more appropriate way.
Yeah.
To be that's a super summary, but and it does a lot more than that and whatever. But yeah, so from a positive psychology perspective, I think that's probably more accessible,
Right.
as far as like almost like a for everyday sort of things, which
Right.
could really build you up for when life really throws those hard things.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Good.
Heal.
Real life.
Yes. Let's go. I'm so excited. Okay, hit me.
Elizabeth and Sunny were riding bikes in Beijing and they were wearing masks.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, that was like a while ago. And, you know, we talk about masks a lot now because of a pandemic. And Reuters had a fact check from September of 2020 where somebody had posted a meme that basically said China's been wearing masks forever. Why do they still have COVID? And it's not been mandatory for masks, not on a regular basis. The meme claimed that they had been regularly wearing masks since 2002, and that's just not true.
No, that's not why they wear them, because it's got bad pollution outside.
Yes.
So the irony is they wear them when you're outside and doing things, and then you take them off when you're inside. And so,
that's exactly it. That they would wear them for bad pollution or during cold and flu season.
Yes.
They would wear them inside during cold and flu season if they themselves felt sick or if a lot of people around them seemed to be ill. They would wear a mask to try and limit the spread of that.
Yep.
So.
And a lot of people in Korea wore them during winter because it keeps you warmer.
Yes. It does. As somebody who's, facing summer in Texas, it definitely keeps you warmer.
Definitely.
Even if Theranos was a failure of epic proportions, Elizabeth was really intelligent.
She was.
She was really a very intelligent person who made a lot of bad choices. Business Insider has an article about some of the downsides of being very intelligent. There are a few that sometimes people think instead of feel, which you'll see later in the show with Elizabeth a little bit. There's a situation, which I don't think you've gotten to.
Because I finished episode 4.
And I don't think you've reached this episode yet, where there's a situation where she should be really sad. And instead she sees the benefit of the situation, and it's really, it really smarts a little bit because she feels callous.
Yeah.
People frequently expect you to be a top performer. So, I mean, we do kind of expect people who are very intelligent to do really well, and many of them don't.
And to never struggle.
Right. Yes. But you might not learn the value of hard work. For people who are really smart, sometimes things come really easy to them. And when it doesn't come easy to them, that's just a thing they don't do.
Yeah, right. They just move on.
Yeah. we kind of saw the opposite of this with Elizabeth. She just assumed that if she worked hard, she could do anything.
Right.
Where, we have to follow the laws of physics, at least in this universe.
Yeah.
And you understand how much you don't know, which we talked about this in Inventing Anna. There was an Aristotle quote of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Right.
And that can also be borderline debilitating once you realize that if you're not able to kind of just cope with it, it can feel like, well, there's so much I don't know. How can I ever achieve anything?
Right.
You just eventually you'll learn what you don't know that you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to just keep learning, keep a learning spirit and a learning mindset. But
Yeah.
That is hard.
So sadly, college-age people are the most likely to experience sexual violence. So this isn't news, but RAINN.
Sadly.
Yeah. RAINN, Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, had a whole article with a lot of statistics that was really interesting. 13% of all students, this is graduate and undergraduate, will experience sexual assault through physical force, violence, or incapacitation. Yeah, it's really terrible. Now, it's interesting. Male college students aged 18 to 24 are much more likely than non-college students to have sexual abuse against them, whereas female college students are actually less likely to, if they're in college, it actually lowers your risk, though more females tend to be assaulted than men.
In general. So that it is a little skewed. But that makes sense too, because you make yourself a higher risk for the perpetrator when you're in college.
Right.
I know that terminology can be kind of weird. I don't know how they really use it, but to say that it's harder you make yourself safer when you're in college by the fact that you're around people.
Right.
You've got,
if you're a woman, and it's the opposite if you're a man.
Right.
It's interesting, but still men are a much smaller
portion.
Yeah. It is the most prevalent crime at college campuses. Most do not report it to law enforcement, and we saw exactly why, because Elizabeth wasn't believed. And the most increased risk of time is their first few months of their first and second semesters in college. So the closer you get to finals, the less likely you are to experience that. But early, especially in freshman and sophomore year, that's when it's most likely to happen. And of course, that's exactly when it happened to Elizabeth. She was a sophomore and
yeah.
So the show may be completed. The limited series is finished, but Elizabeth's story is not.
Okay. Tell me.
Well, she did end up being charged with many counts of fraud.
Okay.
Almost all fraud. And in January of 2022, she had 4 guilty counts against her, all wire fraud of quite a lot of money from 2010 to 2015. And then $6 million up to $100 million. She had four counts that were all guilty. 3 of the charges against her came out no verdict. 4 came out not guilty, and 1 was dropped. Her sentencing is scheduled for September of 2022. So, she could be facing 20 or so years in prison.
Lord.
They expect it to be much, much less than that.
Probably.
So now she said in her own defense, this is from the New York Times. Thank you for their good reporting. Her defense boiled down to 2 major themes. Her actions were misunderstood, she said. Others around her, notably Sonny, were responsible for the company's failure, she said. And finally, she implied because Theranos failed did not mean she had committed fraud. Miss Holmes could not have deceived others about the technology's shortcomings because she herself believed it worked, her lawyers implied.
Ooh.
She really thought that it was going to catch up, and it just didn't, is their excuse. I don't know how much I believe that. And she said that Sonny emotionally and abused her, controlled her. She was manipulated, which may be true, but it was also very dysfunctional relationship.
Yeah.
All right. So I like to end on a happy note. I like to end on something funny.
Okay. All right. Hit me.
Before everything went sideways, it seemed like Elizabeth was doing okay in school and actually making some friends. She had somebody come in and ask her to watch Vanilla Sky with an altered state of consciousness. So I was like, what are movies to watch in an altered state of consciousness? Does Vanilla Sky make the list? Because that movie is trippy.
It is trippy.
It didn't make the list on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay.
But I picked out the movies that we've either talked about or I know that one of us likes.
Okay.
From this list. So The Fifth Element is one of my favorite movies and totally one to watch when you're seeing things a little differently. Fight Club, which we've talked about.
I love that movie.
Tropic Thunder, which I know you like.
Oh my gosh. Oh, my husband is obsessed with that movie. Well, my husband and my kids are obsessed with this movie.
Yes. Inception.
Oh, yeah.
Which I find hard to follow completely sober sometimes. So maybe you just let go of the following and just
You know what?
enjoy
It's like those pictures where you have to try to see the hidden image and you got to relax your eyes.
There you go.
That's how that movie is.
There you go. A 2001 A Space Odyssey, which is a long been heralded as a stoner movie.
Yeah,
let's just be honest. But I saw it in high school on the IMAX.
Oh my gosh.
And I was confused. I was bored.
Yeah.
I was intrigued a little bit about some parts of it, but I just think that, maybe an altered state of consciousness and perception would have benefited my viewing of that movie. And unfortunately, that wasn't anything that I did then or do now. Shaun of the Dead, which is so fun. It's a zombie movie, but it's really funny.
Okay.
You would probably really like it.
Okay.
And then Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Of course. So, next time, we talked about the Staircase documentary back in January of 2019. We watched the whole thing over Christmas break, and we came back and talked about the whole daggum thing. And now there's a fictionalized version on HBO that just came out. And we are going to talk about the first episode. And it's starring Toni Collette. So we get to watch her in another great movie.
Yay!
Or great series. Great piece of entertainment. Crime entertainment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm here for it.
I'm super excited. So until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da, da, da.